All right, everybody, it's 7:30, so let's get started. We have a very special presentation to get us kicked off tonight. Is my mic not on? Can you hear me? All right, 7:30. Woo! All right, thanks everyone for coming back. So let's go ahead and get started. I just want to make a quick introduction for our next presenter. Brad Fitch, in case you guys don't know about the organization that he leads an organization called the Congressional Management Foundation. You may know this organization because if you've been under our community website and looked at some of the webinars that they have partnered with us in developing, it is instrumental in learning really the ins and outs of Congress. Like I said, they research, they survey Congress, they actually train congressional staffers as well. Brad has spent many years on the Hill. He was a legislative director for a senator here in Washington, D.C. Also spent many years as a journalist here in D.C. and has a radio background. So this guy's got it all. But Brad's guidebook, in case you haven't looked at it before, it's called The Citizen's Handbook to Influencing Elected Officials. And he may talk a little bit more about that. But it's one of the things that we've really based a lot of our training on at CCL. The way that they approach members of Congress, the way that they find the effective ways to build relationships has been really helpful for us in our training program. So without further ado, I want to introduce Brad Fitch, everyone. Oh, I forgot. This is Amy's cousin, too. This is Amy's cousin, too, so yeah.
That's a real introduction, yeah. You know how to talk to the audience. Hello, thank you, Ricky. I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. Yeah, cousin and Amy and I reconnected about 6 years ago, and she was telling me what you were doing, and I said, you know, I'm starting a new initiative at the Congressional Management Foundation that might fit into what you're doing, and we're delighted that we have found this partnership. As Ricky said, I run an unusual nonprofit called the Congressional Management Foundation. Our mission is to build trust and effectiveness in Congress. Clearly, we're not very good at what we do. We're a scrappy bunch. Basically, we have an unusual, unique mission. Our mission is to help Congress be more effective in interacting with constituents, to help citizens be more effective and have a better understanding of Congress. And if we do our jobs right, better laws are made. And I know that's what you want as well. You want to have your voice heard in Washington. But we can't sort of start this program and even have this conversation if we don't really just acknowledge the 800-pound gorilla in the room. Because, the real title of this program is this: The Cure for an Election Year Hangover, which a lot of us look like that Wednesday morning, I think, after the election. The basic premise of today's program in the next 30 minutes is this is about power. It's the power to do good. It's the power to change the world. And right about now, you probably don't feel too powerful, I would imagine, but you do have that power because our founding fathers imbued us with some of the most powerful tools ever given to citizens, starting right here with the Constitution and leading it with the Bill of Rights, which said, Congress shall make no law respecting the establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or, thank you. It's a little too abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble, and here it is right here, and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. You have it right there in our organic documents, and you can get downright ornery with a member of Congress. You can send any communication you want. You can send it by post, by email, by fax. You can send it by Pony Express or Federal Express. You can send it with a yam, green eggs, and ham and say it's supported by the King of Siam. The bottom line is you've got to talk, and they have to listen. But here's the problem that you're going to face when you try to get your friends and neighbors and other loved ones involved in your cause. They don't think their voice matters. They hear it over and over again, that their voice doesn't matter. Here's a data point that's pretty depressing that was done by the Rasmussen Company in 2015 and 2016. And they asked this question of their national audience: do most members of Congress care what their constituents think? And regrettably, only 18% would agree with that statement. We often look at congressional approval ratings as an indicator of the ill health of our democracy. I think this number is even more alarming because it says that the governed does not believe that the governing is listening to them. But here's the truth that I'll tell you from my 30 years in Washington and all the research that we've done at the Congressional Management Foundation. They do listen to constituents. In fact, what you're going to see in the next few minutes is that, in fact, constituents can be the most influential of any factor. Let me give you some data to back this up. We did a survey a few years ago of actual members of the House of Representatives. Actual members of the House of Representatives. And we asked them this question right here. How important are these aspects to your effectiveness as a representative? And we listed off a whole bunch of things. And this is what we found, that while only 18% of Americans think Congress cares what they think, 95%, the number one answer from members of Congress was staying in touch with constituents. Now, why do we have that disconnect between perception and reality? Well, I blame him, but then I blame Hollywood for everything. It really did a great disservice, I think, for anybody who watched House of Cards. It doesn't work like House of Cards at all. In fact, it works a lot more like Schoolhouse Rock. And that is how Congress really does work. So tonight, let's jump into it. What we're going to talk about are first power shifts in Congress, how things have changed, how things will change. Even when you have the same party in the House and Senate, that still doesn't mean there isn't change and not an opportunity to build relationships. And we will talk about how to build relationships with lawmakers and why it is essential for you to do so. So along the way, we'll have a little time for Q&A at the end. I think I got a few minutes at the end. So let's jump right into it, to power shifts in Congress. And where this really makes a huge difference is at the committee level, is power shifts in committee. Because as this headline shows, and as we learned really the hard way on Tuesday night, votes matter in different locations. Total number of votes had changed in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, and we'd have a new president, 107,000 votes. Less than 0.2% would have changed this election. 107,000 votes in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania. Now, for those of you who don't realize and think their vote doesn't matter or think where you live doesn't matter in terms of your power structure, think again. Let me give you an example. The ranking member and one of the most wonderful members of Congress that I know is Babs Mikulski, Senator Mikulski from Baltimore, Maryland. Wonderful, great member. But she's retiring after 30-some-odd years in the Senate and more years in the House and at the local Baltimore City Council. So we don't know who the ranking member is going to be on the Appropriations Committee. Well, what does that mean? Well, it means the NASA Greenbelt Goddard Space Center is going to get less money next year. Count on it. It means the Port of Baltimore is going to get less money. It means the Chesapeake Bay is going to have a harder time to get cleaned up because their main champion just left the ranking member on the Appropriations Committee. She was the lead Democrat on the Appropriations Committee. In fact, if you look at how things changed just at the beginning of the last Congress, we saw power move on the Armed Services Committee from Michigan to Arizona. We saw in Maryland out of power and went to Mississippi because she went from ranking to chairman. We saw the state of Washington lose to the state of Wyoming, and we saw the Budget Committee, the Finance Committee go from Oregon to Iowa. That's what happens in any new Congress. In the House of Representatives, the Republicans are term limited. They can only serve 6 years, which means that there are going to be new committee chairmen. In fact, we just read recently, just today, anybody here from Vermont? You're from Vermont? No one here from Vermont? Well, the Vermont people got a little more powerful because Pat Leahy's actually, I just found out today, is actually taking over from Maryland's Barbara Mikulski as ranking on appropriations. So there you go. I mean, that's going to make a difference. So who your committee chairmen are, who your ranking members are, make a difference. So you knowing who they are and doing a little research on how to build relationships with lawmakers is essential to how you exercise your power as a citizen advocate. So let's talk about how to build these relationships. Let's start again with a little data. As Ricky said, my organization is the only group that can research Capitol Hill and congressional staff and members because they know we're going to take the data and we're going to try to make the world a little bit better place for them and for you. And one question we've asked 3 times in 2005, 2010, and 2015 is this question right here. If your member or senator has not already arrived at a firm decision on an issue, how much influence might the following advocacy strategies directed on the Washington office have on his or her decision? We listed a series of advocacy strategies, and we asked would they have a lot of influence, some influence, or no influence at all. We've asked the same question to 3 different sets of senior staffers, hundreds of staffers participating in the survey. Here's the freaky thing. We got the same data back over a 10-year period. So for the cynics in the room, I'm pretty sure this chart's right. Here's what it said. It said that any type of in-person visit from a constituent, 97% would have some or a lot of influence. Contact from a constituent's representative, 96%. So that would have some or a lot of influence. And the constituents representative we defined as a representative from an association, nonprofit, or company in the district or state. That's all of you people. When you walk into that congressional office, the first thing out of your mouth ought to be, hi, I'm with Citizens Climate Lobby, and we have X number of supporters in your state. Because then you just put a big fat tattoo on your forehead. Because that's how many people you're going to talk to about that meeting. That shows your power, your heft, and shows the type of people you influence. Also, I want to stop here and take a look at individual postal messages and individual emails. What this tells us is the vehicle doesn't matter how you deliver the message. It's the content. In fact, by the end of 2016, early 17, for the House of Representatives, this is going to go away. Paper isn't even going to go into the office. It's going to be character read through an optical character reader system, and it's just going to get transmitted electronically. So this isn't even going to matter in the House anymore. If you send a handwritten letter, they'll turn it into a JPEG. But the point is that getting the types of communication to them is essential to do it quickly, but to personalize it. So if you get an action alert from Citizens Climate Lobby and say, contact your representative, contact your senator, take a moment and personalize it at the beginning, right at the beginning, and that'll make a difference. Now, who has more influence, a lobbyist or a citizen? Well, if you watched all 4 seasons of House of Cards, you might say a lobbyist. But in fact, when you compare who has a lot of influence, according to congressional staff, 46% would say an in-person visit from a constituent compared to 8% of a lobbyist visit. Now, lobbyists are what I call professional advocates, because I think, if you think Congress's brand is bad, talk about lobbying, man. They're kind of in bad shape. I call them professional advocates and citizen advocates because that's a more accurate description of the relationship between professional advocacy and citizen advocacy. But let's drill down a little farther. Let's talk about how you can influence lawmakers by looking at how they think. This is the brain of a member of Congress. Please do not worry, no live member participated in this experiment. I know that disappoints some of you. Anyway, let's dissect how they think, how they really think. This big part over here wants to make a difference in the world. That's one of the myths I want to break here today. These are good people. These are public servants who sacrifice a lot. The average work week for a member of the House of Representatives is 70 hours a week. That's the average when they're in session, 70 hours a week. The average number of meetings they have on a daily basis, 13 meetings a day. On a bad day, it's 18 meetings. That's their day. When they go back home, it's 59 hours a week and usually about 8 meetings. Why do they do it? Because they want to make a difference in the world. They want to give back. I have dealt with hundreds of members of Congress. Now, does the American public occasionally send us the cad, criminal, dare I say, wiener? Yes, you do. Thank you very much for that. It keeps late-night talk show hosts talking and, gives material for wait, don't tell me. But by and large, most of the people that you interact with and you're going to see are good people that really want to make a good, positive difference in the world. They also have a desire to please everyone. One member of Congress I interviewed for my book said, I think members of Congress are still just middle children trying to please their father. And that is so true of members of Congress. They're politicians. They want to say yes to you if they can. They also have this very healthy ego. If they do not have one when they come to Washington, one is issued to them. And they also have this ability to raise money. Now, how many of you have met with a member of Congress before? Actually met. So these guys up front, you're like, wow, that's really good. Good for you. Most people looking at this chart say I got this chart wrong, and you're right. This is the brain of a freshman member of Congress after they've been in office a little while. The ego takes over the larger part of their brain. We've tried drugs to stop it from happening. It doesn't stop it. Now, for those of you people up front, you're looking at this little dot, that's the amount of time they spend thinking about your issue. 13 meetings a day. They meet with associations, nonprofits, companies, day in, day out. This image that you have of Congress voting on the floor, that is one of the least important things that they do. That is one where they're exercising the least amount of power. When members go to the House floor, especially in the House, it's a kabuki dance. It's all been planned out at that point. But all the other things they could do in advance of that, they have power. You want them to sign a letter going to the Department of Interior regarding research on climate change? They have power to do that. You want them to sign on to a bill? Most of them have the power to do that because most of the decisions you're asking them to do not affect their reputation or the electoral outcome. So they have a lot more flexibility to be involved than you think. So how do you do it? What do you do? Well, communicate frequently. I was doing a focus group with chiefs of staff, and I asked them, who do you listen to? And the chief said, I hate to admit it, but I listen to the squeaky wheels. Now, I'm not talking about the people that are writing on the envelope side, they want a birthday for Elvis's, a holiday for Elvis's birthday, which I personally think is a good idea, but that's just me. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking 4 or 5 times a year. I'm talking about writing in occasionally, using social media. And we'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. Going to town hall meetings. The average number of people at town hall meetings are 40 or 50 people. You get 2 or 3 people at a town hall meeting for most members of Congress, and you're a mob. You've taken over the meeting. And I can tell you that from personal experience, having worked on Capitol Hill. My first job on Capitol Hill was a press secretary for a Maryland member in suburban Washington. I went to 100 town hall meetings. 100 town hall meetings in the first 4 years on Capitol. Best political education I ever got. And I saw firsthand how citizens can make a difference. Now, what are they looking for when you communicate them? What do they want to hear from you? Well, we put this in a survey question a little while ago, and actually we did in 10 and 15. And the survey question to congressional staff went like this. How helpful is it for messages from constituents to include the following? And this is what we found. Personal story, 48% said that would be helpful or very helpful. 74% said the constituents' reasoning for supporting the bill or issue, and 77% information about the impact the bill would have on the district or state. Said another way by one chief in one of my focus groups when I asked, what does your boss use to make decisions? What sort of factors do they consider? And they said, my boss uses the 3 H's. It's like, what are the 3 H's? He said head, heart, and health, meaning political health. And right up there, folks, you see the 3 H's. You see head, you see reasoning, you see heart, personal story, and then you see health, meaning the district, on the impact of district or state. Let me amplify this with a couple other anecdotes from my research. I was interviewing a member of Congress. One of the best questions I got when I was writing my book was, name for me a difficult decision that you had to make, and let's unpack it. Let's reverse engineer the factors that went into it. And I had this one member who I was interviewing, and he was a Republican, and he said, no, I'm sorry, he was a Democrat, forgive me. And he said, yeah, well, I know what tough one was. I was really wrestling with what to do with climate change. It's a true story. And I said, well, what did you end up doing? And he said, well, I ended up trying to work on cap and trade legislation with my colleagues. And I said, you're from a state with a lot of coal, aren't you? He said, oh, yeah, coal's big in my state. What was the catalyst, I asked him, that got him thinking about this? And he pointed over to a corner of the room, and he said, I read the UN report on climate change. Yeah, they read reports. They would like nothing more than to curl up with a huge GAO study on the impact of NAFTA on cattle transportation. I mean, they're strange human beings. They are very weird. And that's what they like. So you have that on your side in the sense that you've got information, you've got data. Yes, are there people that are denying science? Sure. Right? There are those people. There's people that don't like the Grateful Dead. I don't understand either of those groups, but the point is that you do have that on your side and can be helpful. Another great story I heard about the power of personal stories. I'm going to talk about that a little later, but it can be really powerful. I was interviewing a member, same question, give me a tough decision. And he said, oh yeah, I was really wrestling last year with what to do about whether we should have federal funding for stem cell research. And I was leaning against it, he told me. And I said, well, what got you thinking? He said, well, I said, there was a 17-year-old boy who came on one of those fly-ins, one of those lobby days. And he said, you know, Congressman, I'm 17 years old. I have juvenile diabetes. I just believe that this research someday could lead to a cure to me and others like me. And that member leaned into me and he said, that meeting just stuck with me. And he ended up researching and co-sponsoring legislation for federal funding for stem cell research, and he was a pro-life Republican. So the power of personal story cannot be underestimated. Where do you tell these personal stories? In meetings back in the state, not just in D.C. This is a really valuable new asset. In 2011, when the Republicans took over the House of Representatives, John Boehner and Eric Cantor made a significant change in the schedule. They gave members a lot more clarity on when there were going to be votes. Crazy idea. They're actually going to schedule votes. Had not been done by Hastert, Pelosi, Tom Foley, Jim Wright. You know, you never know. We're going to have votes on Friday? I don't know. That was always the answer. Well, now Boehner and Cantor said, no, we're going to have votes on Thursday until this time or Friday until noon, and then you're going to go back home. Well, they also increased the total number of recesses from 5 recesses a year to 12 recesses a year. They're home a lot more. This is an opportunity to bring in people to their district offices and have meetings with them. If you're a known nonprofit, which you are, you get 4 or 5 people together. Can we come and meet with the congressman and congresswoman? More than likely, they'll set up a meeting with you, or you'll get a meeting with a senior aide. Also, build a relationship with the staff member. Do you want to get to know the senator here? Yes. But sitting on this uncomfortable chair behind her for 4 hours during that hearing is this guy. You really want to get to know that congressional staff member and build a relationship for them. Now, for those of you going up to the Hill for the first time and start meeting with congressional staff, this is what you're going to discover. They're really young. The average age of a House legislative assistant is 27 years old. But before you write off that staffer, let me tell you this story. There was a senator giving a keynote address at a major event here in town some years ago. And he got there a little late, and he wanted to get down some dinner before he had to give the speech. And he's wolfing down his dinner, and he wanted some butter for his bread. He didn't see it, and he saw the waiter over at the end of the table passing out butter. And so he waved for the waiter to come down, and the waiter saw him, waved, and kept passing out the butter. Well, the senator, not being used to be treated this way, so he waved again, and the waiter waved again and kept passing out the butter. Well, he finally got down to the senator, and the senator said, "Didn't you see me waving? I wanted some butter." And the waiter said, "Well, I did, sir, but I had to pass out the butter in the order of the head table." And the senator said, "You don't understand who I am. I'm a United States senator." And the waiter said, "You don't understand who I am. I'm the guy with the butter." These are the men and women with the butter, folks, and before you write off that kid, just remember, the last person that member of Congress is going to talk to before they make a decision on your issue is that 27-year-old wonderkind. So build that relationship with that staff member. You're going to get something incredibly valuable. You're going to get their email address. One of my sojourns into the private sector is I founded a software company. And we did a lot of things with the software for lobbyists, but basically we figured out how to get email addresses and match them up to issue areas and to offices. We sold the company 3 years later. My kids are going to college on that idea. That's how valuable that is. When you get this email address, send a thank you note. Thank them for meeting with you. Here's the trick. Do not tell congressional staff I told you this. When do you think the best time is to send a thank you note to a congressional staffer? Who said Sunday? You've been in my programs before, I bet. Yeah, all right, he cheated. Yeah, it's Saturday and Sunday. Counter program. They're not getting emails they're getting emails from their boss at all hours, but they're not getting emails from lobbyists, from other people. It's like literally about 1/5 of the email traffic they're getting. The average number of emails a congressional staffer gets is between 200 and 500 daily. That's daily. Yeah, Senate chiefs of staff can get 400 to 500. That's why they have their assistants constantly looking at their email. Now, we talked a little bit about this before, but the power of personal story cannot be underestimated. We're learning a lot more about psychological research into persuasion and neuroscience research. One neuroscientist said it like this. It's a great quote. He said, "We are not thinking machines, we are feeling machines that think." And that's exactly what the power of personal stories are, is you've got to somehow connect it. And that allows them to put a face with a decision they're going to make. Let me give you one last story that illustrates this. Guy walks into a doctor's office. No, this is not the beginning of a joke. Guy walks into a doctor's office. He's sick, he's nervous, he doesn't have health care, doesn't have health insurance. This is clearly before Obamacare. This is a true story. And he goes in the back, he puts on one of those little flimsy gowns. Doctor examines him, says, "I don't know what's wrong, we got to do a lot of tests." He's nervous, he's still sitting there. Office manager comes in, big sheet of papers, asks him to sign this agreement for this test, sign that agreement for this test. It was like a negotiating session for him. He had to make these decisions and felt that this was an unfair setting for him to make these decisions. And so he told his congressman, "You're right, there ought to be a law." And he did. He introduced H.R. 2784, No Private Contracts to be Negotiated when the Patient was Buck Naked Act of 1997. It's a real piece of legislation introduced by Congressman Pete Stark of California, quickly became known as the Stark Naked Act of 1997. And it said the following: to promote the equality and negotiation of private contracts, the Secretary of the Health and Human Services shall issue regulations prohibiting the discussion or signing of private contracts at any time when A, the patient is buck naked and the doctor is fully clothed. This is actual legislative language. And conversely, to promote the rights of the doctor when the patient is fully clothed and the doctor is naked. I know the AMA got that amendment in there. That's their power right there. The patient is wearing one of those short, flimsy little gowns that don't close in the back. C, during any sigmoidoscopic or proctoscopic examination of the gastrointestinal tract or digital rectal examination of the prostate. Section E had to deal with stirrups, so he's got the women vote covered there. Point is, he's got 16 co-sponsors, by the way. I'm not kidding. Think about it. Think about one story got a guy to introduce a bill. Think about it. Megan's Law, Amber Alerts, tragic stories that change public policy forever. And if you don't think you have a personal story, let me tell you a true story that literally happened 2 days ago. I'm not kidding. So Donna Brazil, the head of the DNC, is getting up in front of the employees of the DNC on Wednesday morning. Tough crowd, right? Tough speech. She's trying to buck them up. She's trying to make them feel good. And this young staffer, 20-something staffer, gets up and starts chewing her out. All we know is this guy's name was Zach. That's the only thing we know about him because he left before they could kind of get a hold of him. And he was angry that his leaders had let him down. And this is what Zach said to Donna Brazil at this event. You're part of the problem. You and your family, friends are going to die of old age, and I'm going to die from climate change. That's talking truth to power, too. It took a lot of guts. So if you don't think you have a personal story for climate change, Zach did. And you do, too. And now more than ever, when you're looking at what to do and what you can do in the face of what might seem an impenetrable and difficult and impossible to reach Washington, recognize that advocacy, citizen advocacy, is the only thing you have left until the 2018 elections. But it is the only thing that you have left. With that, I think I have a couple of minutes for questions. Yep. So if you could come up to a microphone. Here we go. Oh, great. Thanks, Ricky.
Your hand. Here you go.
Whoa.
A lot of us think that money talks.
That's a statement, but
okay.
I think it's a question.
You all don't have a PAC, right? You do or do not have a PAC? You
do not.
Have a PAC. Yeah, okay. Yep, I did a focus group with the chiefs of staff, the same one, and I asked the group, who has more influence? Someone who comes to a town hall meeting or someone who gives you $1,000? And he said, it depends upon who has the best argument. We listened to both of them. There is a lot of good research that shows that contributions, that people make contributions, have the ability to get easier access to congressmen. You know what you have to do to fight that? Go to a town hall meeting. Ask for a meeting. You're affiliated with a nonprofit that has a brand. And now, we're in a post-Citizens United world. There's a big asterisk associated with that. And for the first time since Watergate, we've had presidential primaries literally bought. And so that's a little different. I'm not at the presidential level. We haven't seen it happen as much at the state and local level and the congressional level as much. We have some in the Senate. That's election outcomes. Political scientists for years have finally given up on trying to tie legislative decision-making to campaign contributions because it doesn't exist. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't at all. But I'm not denying that campaign contributors aren't listened to, but you are too. Yes, ma'am. I think you have a microphone.
Okay, so I've been the liaison for a senator for about 5 years now, and the person filling the role of legislative aid in energy and environment has changed maybe a dozen times. Sometimes they last a few months.
In a Senate office?
Yeah.
Wow.
I've never seen one last more than a year. Sometimes it's left vacant. What's going on?
Well, the average turnover in the House is 4.7 years. You're dealing maybe with legislative aides and not legislative assistants. They're more junior, and the average tenure for that position, legislative aide, these are younger people I'm meeting you're talking to? Because legislative assistant is going to be 30, 40 something. But there is high turnover. There is no question about it. There is turnover on Capitol Hill. That's a reason. One of the things you can do about that, get to know the district and state directors. They have the highest tenure Average tenure for a House district director is 11 years. Those are pretty good jobs. They tend to be the congressman's best friend because they're asking themselves, who do I want to be in a car with when I'm driving from Madison to Milwaukee? And they pick their best friend. Get to know people back home. That's another key way you can do it.
All right, so we're going to have to wrap up. I know this is a very short segment. Go ahead and finish up your closing
I got
comments
one last story to tell you. If I've got some House of Cards fans in the room, I still got to break your cynicism with this one last story. This happened a few years ago at the White House. There was a bill signing ceremony, and it was President Bush, and it had to deal with hunger in the world. And one of the people there was a guy named Dr. David Beckman. Dr. Beckman runs a group called Bread for the World. Some of you may know it. Nonpartisan group just trying to cure hunger in the world. Dr. Beckman sees an opportunity. He goes up to speak to President Bush. He said, Mr. President, thank you very much for signing this bill. It's very important to us. But there's another program I want to bring to your attention. It's called the Millennium Challenge Account. Last year, your budget had $500 million in it, and we're hoping for a 10% increase to $550 million. And President Bush said, well, I know the program, but I'm not an expert, but we do have an expert here. And he beckoned over the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator Richard Lugar of Indiana. And Senator Lugar said, I know this program very well. In fact, I just got a letter from one of my best constituents, Connie Wick, who said this is a great program and we should give it more funding. Folks, when this photograph was taken, Connie Wick was 82 years old. She lived at the Robin Run Retirement Community on Happy Hollow Lane in Indianapolis, Indiana. I swear I didn't make that up. She's not a big political contributor. She's not a lobbyist. She was one woman who wanted to feed hungry people. The next year, the Bush administration increased the Millennium Challenge account budget from $500 million to $1.2 billion. Now, you got to ask yourself, that one voice could make a difference. What could the chorus of your voices do? And remember what Mr. Jefferson taught us. We in America do not have a government by the majority. We have a government by the majority who participate. So go forth and participate, and good luck with your advocacy efforts. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Again, thank you to Brad Fitch. Again, if you guys are looking for more of what Brad has to offer in the Congressional Management Foundation, if you go into CCL Community in the search bar, you can put in the initial CMF for Congressional Management Foundation. It'll pull up all their webinars. There's over 10 of them online, and lots of the same research they've been doing and lots of the same information that Brad has are on those webinars. So please make use of those. And I'm going to turn it over to Ashley, the beautiful Ashley.
Thank you, Ricky. All right, I have something even more fun to do than I did this morning. So, this is really fun. I'm excited about this. So, does anybody have the briefing invites for the Congressional Black Caucus? So you're having a meeting, you're a meeting lead, and you have a meeting invite for the Congressional Black Caucus. Please get it out of your folder or your bag. It's only if your meeting invite is for the Congressional Black Caucus. So if you've got a meeting invite for the House or the Senate, you can mime what we're doing, but I'm not asking you to actually do it. Okay? So does everyone have their handout out? The CBC, Congressional Black Caucus, if you have one. Get it out. Hold it hot dog wise, which is this way, not this way. Hot dog wise. Okay, seriously, if you have them, hold them up. I want to see them. Now do this. I'm not kidding. This is real life. Okay, and now do this. So what is going on is there is an issue on the invitation. The office has asked us to not hand these out to the Congressional Black Caucus members when we go in tomorrow, okay? So we're not handing them out because when Congress asks us to do something, we listen to them. So what you're going to do now is, if you had that, you're going to write down the day and time and location, and you're going to verbally invite them when you're in your meeting with them, instead of giving them an invitation, because the office who is sponsoring this asked us to do this. So the time you want to write down is 11 to 12 on Thursday the 17th, and it's in Cannon Room 340. Again, that's Cannon Room 340, and that's from 11 to 12 on Thursday the 17th. And that's for Congressional Black Caucus members and their staff and interns. So you can just explain what the briefing is, that Kevin Omel's going to be presenting, and that that's the invitation information verbally. Okay, so that was step one. Okay, so step two is open to everybody. Step two is that if you would like, if you don't have or you would like another one, your very own CCL logo bag, which I'm a big fan of these, and your own CCL logoed mug, we, while supplies last, are going to be giving these out for free to volunteers who are willing to take a few minutes tomorrow while you're on the Hill to deliver congressional briefing invitations to offices where we're not having meetings tomorrow. So there are some Senate offices and some House offices where we didn't get a meeting scheduled for whatever reason, and so we need some volunteers to drop off about 10 or 15 invitations to those offices. And we have it organized by the building and the floor, so you can hit the whole second floor of Rayburn or the whole fourth floor of Longworth. So we're going to have a table set up right outside in the back of this blue pre-function room here. After the program's over, do not do this now. After the program's over, if you are interested in helping out by delivering these and also getting some sweet CCL swag, we will be out there with all the information, the rooms that they get delivered to, and copies of the invitations. So that is my exciting news for tonight. So now I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie Doyle, who is going to be talking about existing bills that are similar to CCL's bills.
This is not as fun as ripping up paper. And if you were here in June, you've already heard this, so I apologize, but it's still important to know about the bills that are currently in Congress. So all of you have this document in your folders. It's titled Legislation of Interest for CCL in 2016, and if you want to take it out, you can follow along. So each page is going to be a different bill, and at the top will be the name. And the first one is McDermott, so that's the name of the legislator who submitted it, and then you have the name of the bill, so Managed Carbon Price Act of 2015. And the first category after the name is going to be the bill number, which is pretty self-explanatory, but it's also going to have the day that the bill was submitted. Following that, you have status, so this is where the bill is now, if it's been introduced, if it's sitting in committee, and how many co-sponsors it has. And if you want to check who the co-sponsors are, you can go online and look up the bill. At the bottom of the page, they each have a link. You'll have to type it in, but it's on there. Following that, we have the initial price. So this is what the carbon fee is, or if it's a cap and trade bill, this is usually considered the price of the allowance at the start. And it should also say who the authority is that sets the price. Following that is the rate of increase. So this is how much the fee or price is going to go up, and some of them are more complicated. Where assessed is where the fee or price is placed on the fossil fuel, and most of them are similar to ours, so upstream or midstream. Revenue destination is what happens to all the money from the revenue, who gets it, when, how much. The border covers whether the border is addressed in the bill, and if it is, what the details of their border policy is. CO2 equivalents is any other greenhouse gases that are covered in the bill. So this includes methane, nitrous oxide, sulfur, hexafluoride, parafluorocarbons, hydrofluorocarbons, which are HFCs, or anything that affects the climate to some degree of non-negligible. Next is exemptions. So this covers any industries or products that are exempted from the tax. The usual suspects are agriculture or anything that's a heavily carbon-intensive product. Basically anything that would be at an especially big disadvantage. And then notable helps to cover a bit more of the unique things about the bill, such as if it's a cap and trade bill. In the McDermott example, it explains the permit that's priced. And then following that is our CCL's take, which is a quick description of how the bill should be viewed from CCL's perspective. And this includes what we like, what we don't like, and is probably the most important part of this document when you go into offices that you should be familiar with. So I'm going to go over our take for each of these really quickly, just so you can hear them and get familiar with them. Most of these have been around for over a year, except the last two, which were submitted more recently. So the first one is McDermott, Managed Carbon Price Act of 2015. And we believe it's fantastic that non-CO2 greenhouse gases are included, as is the complete revenue neutrality and 100% dividend in this bill. The rate of increase is more aggressive than CCL's for the first 10 years, but their 2050 goal is lower than ours. The element of EPA choosing the price within the range we anticipate will be unappealing to Republicans. And the fee should be assessed all the way upstream to ensure no refund to fossil fuel exporters at the border, as written in this bill, is legal. Requiring fossil fuel emitters to buy permits, as opposed to simply calling it a fee, we think won't be effective in avoiding the claim that this is a tax. And overall, this is the closest bill to CCL's own proposal of the bills reported here. McDermott and McNerney, the mix, are the ones that are like ours. Following that one is Van Hollen. This is the Healthy Climate and Family Security Act of 2015. So we full-heartedly applaud the revenue neutrality of this bill, as well as the decision to return the revenue as a dividend. Furthermore, the structure of the cap in this 28-page bill appears both elegant and effective. However, CCL chose in 2009 to support a fee instead of a cap and trade for reasons that are as true today as they were then. Cap and trade is our second favorite solution, but we continue to believe that a straightforward rising fee is a more efficient mechanism for reducing emissions than a declining cap and has a better chance of winning bipartisan support. Next one is Delaney, which is the Tax Pollution Not Profits Act of 2015. So this bill is clearly and admirably designed to reach across the aisle to Republicans, and for that it is to be soundly applauded. However, because the bill includes up to 2% of the revenue for assistance to coal miners, it's not technically revenue neutral. Our experience strongly suggests this is a non-starter for Republicans. We fear the rate of increase in this bill is too low to meet climate targets established by the scientific community. The complexity of the rebate to poorer households could be eliminated by adopting the simplicity of CCL's dividend by refunding all the revenue. Next up is White House Schatz, the American Opportunity Carbon Fee Act of 2015. As evidenced by the launch at the conservative American Enterprise Institute, this bill is aimed very clearly at attracting Republican co-sponsors, and for that, Senators Whitehouse and Schatz are to be thanked. This bill also pioneers new ground in how a dividend could be efficiently returned to households at a low cost. We fear the initial price is too high and the rate of increase is too low, though we understand the desire to benchmark the rate to something on which policy is already being directed. Of course, we prefer a straightforward and equal 100% dividend to rebating some of the revenues to corporations. Next up is Larson's America's Energy Security Trust Fund Act of 2015. For this one, 100% should be returned to households to keep the tax transparent and simple, and reducing payroll taxes alone will miss millions of Americans who are unemployed, making this return mechanism regressive. Fossil fuels should not be eligible for a rebate at the border, and methane should be included from the outset, as well as direction that its indirect effects be included. Then we have Sanders' Climate Protection and Justice Act of 2015. And this bill was clearly written with low-income families in mind. We believe a bill that does not ensure families are able to cope with increased prices from the fee, even if passed, will be repealed. This makes such considerations essential. However, we prefer the simplicity of 100% dividend back to all households. The rate of increase starts much slower pace than CCL's proposal and doesn't reach as high of a price by 2050. The bill also sends back much of the dividend for investments into government programs, which CCL believes will make it more difficult to win bipartisan support. Lastly, other greenhouse gases should be included in this bill. And then the last one, which we heard a little about already, is McNerney Consumers Rebate to Ban Emissions and Boost Alternative Energy, or the Rebate Act. This concise bill is wonderful, with 100% of the dividend going back to households at the outset and an aggressive rate of increase. However, it does vary from CCL's proposal in a few important ways. The price goes up $15 a year as opposed to our $10, but stops increasing when emissions are 50% of 2005 emissions, whereas we target 10% of 1990 emissions. In addition, revenue is deposited directly into the Treasury as opposed to creating a trust fund, and the dividend is returned on a quarterly rather than a monthly basis. After 10 years, Treasury gives back only a portion of the revenue generated, keeping the rest, meaning the bill is not 100% revenue neutral at that point. And CCL believes that the only way to ensure Republican support is with a bill that is 100% revenue neutral the entire time it is in place. And one thing that's important to remember for these bills and this document is that you can use it to be a resource for the offices that you meet with. If they're interested in aspects of some of these bills, you can direct them to those members, such as if they're interested in helping coal miners. I think it was Delaney's includes that. But anyway, knowing which aspects of these bills make them different allow us to connect offices together who are interested in parts of the bills for climate legislation, and it allows us to be a resource for offices and staff. That's it. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
It's in the folders.
But we can give them to the office.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes, if offices ask you for this, you can give it to them. Yes. Because there's no Republicans on any of these. That's the main difference.
Do these bills just continue to be out there, or is there a time when they disappear?
I believe they have to be resubmitted next Congress. So in January, these will be, unless they get resubmitted, they won't be a part of it anymore.
I'm back. So I want to take a moment as we close out the evening here to reflect a little bit on some of the fundamental things about CCL. And I want to start with something which is very fundamental to CCL, and that is our second goal. Sometimes we forget that CCL not only exists to create the political will for a livable world, but also to empower our volunteers to experience breakthroughs in exercising their personal and political power. And I love this goal. I think that this is a really powerful goal. I don't think that CCL is what it is without this. But I also think that it's easy to forget about, and it's easy to gloss over this. And I want to unpack this, talk a little bit about what it means for me. And the CCL training that we provide for our volunteers, I love that it can't be unlearned. What you've learned here today, what you've learned before today, you're not gonna forget this. You're gonna take the lessons you learn here, talking about climate and carbon fee and dividend, and you're gonna apply them to a whole bunch of other topics that you find interesting. And so what we're really doing is we're creating a new type of activist for years to come. And we're really fundamentally changing our democracy. So I want to give a couple of examples of that. First of all, I'll give me as an example. I found CCL in 2008. I was wandering around Earth Day, and I found Marshall, and I thought this would be cool. He came and talked to some students, and he did, and he started a group, and I wasn't expecting that, but I said yes. And CCL taught me how to get that meeting with that member of Congress, how to present myself in that meeting, how to work with the team, how to write letters to the editor. I didn't know what a letter to the editor was, believe it or not, and nor did I know who my member of Congress was before I found CCL. So it's a startling admission. But now look at me. Here I am. And it's not just me. I want to tell a story about Donna Dew, a great regional coordinator for the Southeast. He told me a story in June about how his wife, Katie Rose, had taken the CCL model and applied it to something else. Forgive me, Dawn, that you're here. I'm going to forget the details, but I think it had something to do with city planning and trees. And she was complaining to Dawn, I think I'm doing something wrong. We did this, and it took us 3 months to get it done. And, and I love that story for a couple of reasons. One, that it proves that you can apply what we're teaching in another context, and you can have success. Two, it reminds me that the methodology really does work. It's just that we just decided to apply it to a really, really, really hard problem. And so I feel a little bit better about, we've had some success, but for a lot of years, this is all I had. I mean, the changing people's lives, seeing people come to our conferences and leave, dark and sad and leave with a twinkle in their eyes. I think that that's still what I'm most proud of for being a part of this organization. And that story also brings me to one of Marshall's quotes, his favorite quotes, and it's one of my favorite quotes by Anonymous. But the quote is, "Be outrageous. It's the only place that isn't crowded." And really, I see that as what we have done. What have we done that is outrageous? Well, calling for a policy like ours for years, when it wasn't on the agenda at all, that was outrageous. I can't tell you how many people told us, well, that's never going to happen, when we started talking to them about carbon fee and dividend. And now they don't say that anymore. You have all the people who were up here on that panel saying CCL is an important force, and your policy is serious consideration that people are really considering. I think that that's a result of being outrageous. Continuing to advocate for such an aggressive rate of increase like we have, you just heard Stephanie go over some of the other bills, that remains outrageous. And I think that it's important to have an organization that keeps its eye on this is what is necessary to get the reductions we need to achieve a livable world. Never giving up on bipartisanship. I'm a little bit surprised that that is outrageous, but that turns out to be outrageous. Never giving up on bipartisanship, requiring that our bill is submitted with a Republican on it from the get-go, focusing on appreciation and respect for the service that people have done over the years. That is, in fact, outrageous, and we need to keep doing that. Another thing that is outrageous is having 300 people here in November, a week after the election, with 350 meetings booked. That is outrageous. And another thing that I think is important to consider as you go forward is that CCL is really part of an ecosystem of advocacy organizations. And in any ecosystem, you don't have one organism that does all the things. You have a bunch of organisms that do one thing well. They have their niche. And so earlier in the day, I laid out three things that an environmental group could do. They could focus on the federal Congress. They could work on state and local initiatives, or they could lawyer up and keep challenging in the courts. Well, it's important for groups to pursue all of those things. And I don't think it's necessary for all groups to agree on the best approach. That would be like all the organisms agreeing, well, we're going to be vegetarians now. And if you did that, the ecosystem would collapse. So I think it's good to have groups with different approaches, taking different tacks, but also talking to each other, maintaining open lines of communications. I think that many groups had given up on focusing on Congress. I think that they had just said, nope, we're not gonna talk to Congress. We're gonna give up on that bipartisanship. That's too outrageous. And that is a niche that had been pretty much abandoned. But CCL decided to step in, and I think that this came out on Saturday's call with Catherine Hayhoe. First, we were an outsider organization, and it was Mark's story about drafting the bill. We really didn't know what we were doing. I mean, full disclosure, we had no idea. But we said, this is a need. This is a niche that needs to be filled. And when you look around now, people are looking to us as the experts. So by occupying that niche, saying that needs to be filled, and filling it, and learning on the job, and just doing what needed to be done, we have become the experts. I think we need to look at what other groups are doing, not copy them. Some of those groups we can't copy. So, for example, James Dozier, his group, really coming from a partisan perspective and trying to elect Republicans, I think that's important work. It helps the space. Walt Minnick, what he's doing, focusing on corporate tax offsets going to businesses, I think that's another thing that really helps the space. And then, of course, having Democratic members of Congress submit their own pieces of legislation. This is all important. It's all part of this ecosystem of advocacy, taking different approaches to build the argument for carbon pricing. But I think that we really need to own our niche. I think we need to inhabit it. I think we need to become comfortable with it. And again, I think we need to recognize that no one has filled this niche as effectively as you have. No one has been as successful in being so outrageous to find something they appreciate about their Republican member of Congress and saying that to their face and having these productive discussions with them as a result. There's nobody who can walk into these meetings and has a reputation, which we do, of having these productive conversations. That is why. It's because of our reputation as much as because of our experience that we have 10 positive meetings with Republicans for every one meeting that is not so positive. And going back to being outrageous and calling for a policy that is a match for the scale of the problem, this is also a niche to be filled. And I think the best way of explaining this is how we came to have the Gibson resolution. When our folks, along with FCNL folks and a bunch of other faith leaders, went into Representative Gibson's office, he thought they were going to ask them for carbon fee and dividend again. And so he starts going on the defensive. He's talking about all the reasons why he can't submit carbon fee and dividend. And I think it was Karen Frischkopf who actually had to stop him and say, no, that's not why we're here. What we're here to ask you to do is to introduce a resolution saying climate change is real, humans have had an impact, and Congress should do something about it. And he said yes, immediately. So that experience is also informing this November lobby day. June is the time when we make a hard ask, a tough ask, a challenging ask. November is the time to back off that a little bit, make an easier ask, get them into the habit of saying yes. So I think that that's all part of the strategy. It's informed by that experience. And I think that our advocacy for this, our focus on not just our first goal, but our second goal, calling attention to the fact that a policy as aggressive of ours is necessary, but allowing for intermediate steps, making it seem reasonable, calling for this aggressive policy with all the jobs it's going to create, the economic growth it's going to enable, the lives it's going to save, the emissions it's going to reduce. It makes everything else that's a bit more incremental seem more possible. So that's it. That's how I'd like to close. I really appreciate your attention for today. I'm really excited to hear about your meetings tomorrow, and I'm really excited for you continuing to build those positive relationships with both sides of the aisle. So thank you, and go get them.